we've got to talk about UFC Philly, the main event. Gaethje versus Barboza. What that noise says it all. What a fight that was. We'll have a little look at the rest of the card as well, the highs and lows for UK fighters. News of the week, some fight announcements, what's happening with the welterweight division. That seems to be the one that a lot of the focus is on at the minute. The reactions to Conor McGregor's retirement, and then, like I said, we'll have a little look at the listener questions we got sent through. So first of all, mate, let's just start with what a fight Gaethje versus Barboza was. 1 round. I told you they're going to exchange leg kicks. I was surprised that Gaethje was the one getting a few more off, but Barboza sent a few baseball bats through his shins, and then Gaethje does what he did, added the pressure and got the finish. What did you think of the fight?
It was average.
It was average.
No, but yeah, I mean, like, you look at two guys, and you know this is going to be a fight, and sometimes fights don't deliver, but this one, you know, is always going to deliver, and yeah, I mean, either of them, because I knocked either out, you know, they both have been rocked a few times. You saw Gaethje in a lot of these fights. He gets rocked about 5 times and then ends up winning.
Still ends up winning, yeah.
So I'm surprised he didn't get rocked in this one. He looked really good. He actually has really good leg kicks as well. When I say good, it's not so much the technique. He just throws them so hard. Like, he has no, awareness of... He doesn't care about his body, you know. It's not as if he's worrying about, I don't want to kick someone's knee, I don't want to hurt my shin. He just
throws limbs, mate. He just throws limbs.
But I was really impressed with his aggressive and his boxing sort of styles, and coming forward, he was getting a good head movement. I mean, his hands looked a lot better than it has for a long time for me with Gaethje, you know. But Barboza looked so dangerous all the time. But you saw Gaethje kind of getting underneath some of his shots, rolling, good slip and roll, and the knockout was just picture perfect for me. Is me and my coach in a boxing coach in America called Dr. Paulie Gloves. With his thing is called a free south, is where you throw a right hook from a southpaw position. So that's why it's called a free south, and it's very good for an orthodox fighter to switch stances, especially if someone's close to the cage or the ring. You're circling off to your left, and you're throwing a right hand, and then they go the opposite way,
thinking they're safe.
I think they're safe. And if I try to again throw another right hand from an orthodox position, they're too far away. But if I step over into a southpaw stance, the left hook, the right hook, which is the free south, is right there. And a lot of people are very unaware, going out, circling out to their left. They think they're very safe and far away from a shot, which they're not. And obviously he came that way, hands down, and... But that was game over.
You look at the finishes, and you talk about the matchup. So Barboza, since 2010, has won 7 fight of the night bonuses or fight night bonuses. So whether that's knockout of the night or fight of the night. Justin Gaethje has been in the UFC since 2017. He's had 5 fights. He's had 6 fight of the night bonuses. That says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's his nickname, the highlight. But the way he fights and if you're not used to watching Justin Gaethje, if you've just seen him in the UFC and you like adrenaline, go back and watch his other 15, 20 fights, because every single one is exactly the same.
I mean, I remember, but knowing obviously not a lot of people knew about him before he got into the UFC. You know, obviously he was in the Strike Force, but I just watching those fights back in those days. He just he fights on adrenaline. He just throws fights, and a lot of people don't realize. He's a high level wrestler, right?
One of the most he's got
decorated,
one of the most decorated wrestlers in the UFC. Just doesn't use it.
Doesn't use it at all.
Yeah.
He did not even once. You never see him go for any sort of takedown. You know, anything. He just literally stand. He wants to fight. He's like, okay, I've wrestled before. I've wrestled.
I've done that.
Done that. You know, done high, done well. Now I just want to fight. You know, So it is kind of scary knowing he has that ability in his locker if he needs to use it.
Yeah, but what is also scary, and the bit that I loved as well, is he almost scares himself with how he fights. He talked about that his post-fight
his coaches must be having changing underwear in between rounds.
He comes. Is it Team Grudge or something? That the one down in, is it Colorado? So it's the same place as Namajunas trains, but it is the same place that Shane Carwin used to train Brendan Schaub, and Brendan Schaub's talked about the way they train down there, and that was when literally Shane Carwin, one of the biggest heavyweights ever to fight in the UFC, would spar with lightweights and welterweights. They just shove them in if you're spare, if you're free.
Sometimes that's the always talk about this. There's disadvantages and advantages being in a small and big gym. If you're in a really big gym like an American Top Team, you have sparring partners in abundance. So if you're fighting a southpaw 45 pounder, a southpaw, you've got one there. You got some guys, a jiu-jitsu guy, you got one. You got every kind of look in those sort of big gyms, but because it's quite a big gym, sometimes you don't get the attention you would need as an individual fighter because there's so many fighters there. Then you go to a smaller gym, you have a lot more attention from your individual coaches, but you're gonna have to go in sometimes with
Shane Carwin,
with a bigger guy, because just because you don't have the partners, unless you start bringing partners in just for you sparring and stuff like that. That's where the sport is now, I guess, where people get bigger purses. They could maybe afford to bring guys in. But back in the days when, like even like in this country right now, if someone wants to go to, and they're living in a small little town somewhere, they're going to be rolling around with bigger guys,
Yeah.
I had the luxury of having a lot of good people my size to train with, so I didn't have to roll around with middleweights, welterweights, even lightweights, even featherweights. I could actually stick to my weight class pretty much.
Wow, that's ridiculous. But that team seemed to have bred that fighter. What's next for him then? Because he says he wants the guys above him. Poirier is fighting Holloway. Later, Poirier beat him, obviously. If you look at that division, who do you want to see him up against next?
Honestly, if me being a selfish fan, I would love to see him fight Khabib. I think stylistically, it's going to be.
But in this one of the names, that no matter who you say him against, like, you get a little tingle.
100%.
If you went down there, you went against Tony Ferguson, against Nate Diaz. Imagine that fight. Nate Diaz versus Justin Gaethje. Conor McGregor, let's get his name back in there.
But that's just that weight class, I mean, like some folks, I don't look forward to
Cowboy Cerrone.
I wouldn't like him fighting Conor McGregor as much as I think Khabib.
Yeah,
I'm actually more excited to see him fight Khabib. But the reason I say this is because Khabib is so dominant in his manhandling kind of aspect.
That discipline and that.
And that we just briefly touched on Gaethje's wrestling ability and his credentials. I'm like, okay, I want to see someone like Khabib manhandle Gaethje.
Yeah,
see how that goes down.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, as a selfish matchmaker, that's the part I'd actually want to see the most. Because I want to see who's going to give the title holder
the most trouble,
or answer questions that haven't been answered before.
Yeah,
So okay, cool. We've seen him. We've seen Khabib versus Conor. We saw how that went out. So I don't see that going to be too dissimilar to maybe him versus Holloway. So that's pretty similar. So I want to see a different animal, like a different look. I think someone like Gaethje does provide that different look.
I think so. I think he said it himself as well. He reckons he poses the most problems for Khabib, and just that style, that pressure. And we haven't seen the wrestling like in any of his fights. He doesn't really use it. He uses it to stay standing sometimes. If people go try and take him down, I'm trying to think back to some of the fights.
He's been taken down a few times as well. He has been taken down. So I always do say this as well. Even though he's been a high-level wrestler, it doesn't mean you got good wrestling for MMA. So I like to see how he does wrestle within MMA.